It has been said, as the largest democracy in South Asia, India is more like the U.S. than any other country in that region. According to a Chinese newspaper, Global Times, the U.S. is trying to escalate the Sino-Indian standoff. The article said neither India nor China favor a war, but referred to commentaries in the U.S. media calling on Washington to support India to deter and counter China and rally the world against Beijing. So, what is America's position regarding the South Asia? Does the U.S. see a strategic ally in India, or it wants to send a coded message to China about freedom of navigation? Join me here in the studio is Anar Tangan, and also we'll be joined by Prakash Nanda later on from the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies from New Delhi. So let me start with you, Anar. A Chinese daily, the Global Times, a subsidiary of People's Daily, has accused the U.S. of trying to escalate Sino-Indian standoff and seek strategic benefits. So far, Donald Trump hasn't paid much attention to U.S.-Indian ties. There are divergences on trade and immigrations. Do you think the U.S. is seriously trying to meddle with the China-India conflicts?
Well, if you go back to, there was a 2010 white paper, which has not changed, which laid out the strategy that the U.S. had in Asia. And the main part of that strategy was to use India as a doorstop, preventing China's expansion. This has not changed. It's something that appeals to Donald Trump. And certainly, given the situation in Washington right now, he would be desperate to change the conversation that is going on there. Anything to deter, take away the heat from the Russian issue and his lack of ability to push through his domestic agenda.
But I don't believe that Donald Trump's administration wants to be too frontal confrontation with China over the border dispute issue on this, especially considering that China has maintained control over Donglang area.
Well, what you have is, as usual with Donald Trump, you do not have a fixed policy. You have different voices coming from very, very different areas. Tillerson has repeatedly called to have things settle down. He wants these two giants to come to some sort of terms, which, short of any kind of conflict, which would be bad for business worldwide and for both countries. But then you hear other voices, the Steve Bannons of the world, who would like nothing more to see China engaged in some sort of long-term conflict with one of its neighbors. He whole narrative was about how China and the U.S. would come to military conflict at some point in the future, and enlisting allies like India in this part of this would be an important part of how he sees the world.
And if there is a military conflict between China and India over the border, do you think the Americas would really send his soldiers to come to the aid of India?
Well, it's very unlikely at this point, given that in the U.S., this has not hit the headlines. This is not a hot button topic. People are not feeling in any way that this was a situation where the U.S. needs to get involved. With more troops already going into Afghanistan and into the Middle East, with uncertainties abounding, it is not the time to start another war on another front. On the other hand, something low level where the U.S. can sit back and watch these two neighbors expend their energies and take away from their economic abilities would, of course, be very, very fine with Donald Trump and his view of America first.
So Donald Trump's administration wants to be subtle if it wants to aid India in any way. How do you think China should respond to this?
Well, first off, as I keep saying, there are different voices within the Trump administration who are saying different things, so it's very difficult to pin down exactly what Donald Trump thinks. Obviously, Steve Bannon and Tillerson are on the opposite ends of this particular dispute. So it's not clear how things will go forward from here. It has not hit obviously has not hit the newspaper pages in the United States simply because it's been monopolized by everything that's going on with the domestic agenda and with Russia.
But India wants to cozy up to the United States, obviously. Last month, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi met with Trump in Washington, and Trump described the relationship, according to him, as never been stronger, never been better. The apparently jovial tone was in contrast to what has been predicted to be a tough meeting because there are many differences between India and U.S., especially over IPR protection, trade, and immigration. So what is your general assessment of U.S.-India relations, despite many of the obstacles I mentioned?
Well, it's very odd. I mean, Modi did not really get anything in return for voicing the support. And if you start looking at the dates of this particular incident between China and India, it was in progress at that point. And Modi had an opportunity to either withdraw his troops or continue. It seems that he is intent on showing the U.S. that he's willing to be the, quote, doorstop to Chinese expansion. But for what benefit? Everybody is scratching their head to understand what the exit strategy is or the long-term goal that India can get from this type of situation. Destabilization will not help India in terms of its growth. There's not going to be any dollars being sent by Washington to Delhi to help with their much-needed infrastructure. On the other hand, China has been holding out an open hand, both on everything from SCO to the Belt and Road Initiative, saying and offering money towards infrastructure, which is badly needed. So people are still trying to figure out exactly what India expects for this. Now, on the other hand, it is true that as China expands, not necessarily on a military basis, but the fact is, just sheer economics, China is encroaching into what India sees as their primary historical areas of influence. And this is having a big effect in terms of their pride. They feel themselves being kind of overwhelmed by their larger Chinese neighbor.
So what exactly did Modi get from Donald Trump in terms of security? Just a moral support or more substantive support?
Well, he got nothing. He got the right to buy more American arms, which I don't necessarily see as a benefit. Maybe he does. I mean, right now, India's military situation is a ragtag. They have Russian jets, they have French submarines, they have some American materials, they have stuff from Israel. It's kind of a ragtag collection of things, but they are a very big buyer in the world market. Donald Trump wanted that, he got it, but the question is, why didn't Modi get something? There was no give on the issue of visas for tech people from India. It's a big, big issue in India. It's been a growth market for them. There was not one single nice word said about it. In fact, Donald Trump doubled down and said, no, we won't be doing that anytime soon.
And let's get some Indian perspective. We're joined by Prakash Nanda from the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies in New Delhi. Mr. Nanda, we're talking about India-US relations. What do you think India get from improved relationship with the U.S. when Mr. Modi visited Washington?
You see, when one talks of India and the United States relations, they are in a multi-pronged. You can't straitjacket the relationship strictly in military terms, in the sense that India is one of the largest buyers of the American arms, which factually speaking is not substantial at all. For instance, whatever people may say, but the cold statistics suggest that over the last 10 years, India at the most must have or would have bought American arms worth 20 to 25 billion dollars. And as I'm saying, this is in the higher term. The statistics may be actually little lower than that. But
India
recall,
didn't get any concessions from the U.S. on trade,
Saudi Arabia,
immigration, apart from that military equipment
my point
deal.
is that, as I said, the India. Yes, I said that India-US relations are basically can be divided into 5 components in my opinion. One is defense relationship, one is government to government relationship, one is in the relationship between Bangalore and the IT as well as their Silicon Valley, and then one is the Indian students and the American universities. Let's face it, Indian students comprise a substantial number of their elite universities. And the most important thing is this: the Indian diaspora, the people of Indian origin, they may be smaller in number, but they're near 2 million now in the United States, but they are among the richest. I think according to a latest survey, the Indian Americans happen to be among their largest and richest communities in the United States.
But they
so
haven't
obviously
translated into political leverages in changing Donald Trump's policy regarding immigration and trade, has it?
Yes. I think, as I said, that this is a question of Donald Trump. In any case, a presidency cannot be judged just in its when it is in office only for 3 or 4 months. So this is a continuous dialogue. And if you ask the Indian government, they say, their spokespersons say that it is not that bad as the situation or the reports do suggest. In fact, only 15 days back, the Americans gave the Indians that concession that when they go to America, in their airports, they will be getting quicker and faster clearance. So as I said that it is not a question. It is obviously it is not a zero-sum game.
I want to come to the military
course,
part of this, because obviously China and India is now in a standoff or the border issue. The U.S. offered for Indians a consideration of the sale of what we call Sea Guardian unmanned aerial system. That's obviously a reconnaissance system. Could this mark the first step of U.S.-India improved military relationship that is eyeing China in this part?
Well, I see the reconnaissance planes that you are talking of, they are meant for the Indian Navy. And then when one talks of these reconnaissance planes, so it is not a new development. I think 7-8 years back, India really had their first this thing. So it is a continuation of the process. It has nothing to do with Modi government as such. It is a continuation of the policy that the previous Manmohan Singh government had taken. These reconnaissance planes are not something very, very new. They were there. India had bought them. I think way back in 2012, a couple of them. So now the more numbers have been that conclusion, that deal has been, or there has been agreement to buy more of them. The point is that when one talks of defense, then what the Modi government and there the Americans come in a big way. They want that the American military systems to be produced in India, which is in continuity with Modi's Make in India policy. Well, so in that sense, they are bargaining, like Lockheed. They say that they can manufacture their F-16 planes there in India itself. It is not only meant for India. From India, they can sell it to
India
other
wants
countries.
to produce its own weapons in India. Of course, the United States has problem with that. So, NR, what do you make of the nature of U.S.-India military relationship? It's just a purchase of weapons, or there will be step-up cooperation like manufacture of weapons and more strategic cooperation?
Well, the strategic cooperation may explain some of it. This nationalism that's going on with the Modi government is very clearly just trying to stand up and say, look, India will not be the sick man of Asia. We're going to protect everything that is ours. We will make sure that China does not overtake Sri Lanka or any of these other possessions. The difficulty that you have here is that China and India historically never had a border. And then, because of the vicissitudes of various colonial governments, they suddenly did, and they've been put up against each other. There are no historical precedents. There's only a lot of old paper where it said, here's the line, there's the line, and those are things. So it is difficult. It would be better if these two neighbors were to sit down and figure out what the issue is, rather than turning to a third party who is intent on destabilizing Asia for their own interests.
To tap into the old wisdoms of the two old nations. We're running out of time. Thank you very much, Mr. Prakashananda from the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, and also N.R. Tongan, our current affairs commentator. And here is my first point. Over the last 7 decades, the relationship between the U.S. and India has been a story of both differences and cooperation. The end of the Cold War and the disintegration of the Soviet Union changed the world geopolitics and the mindset of the U.S. and India towards one another. Every year, leaders of the two countries met one another, and the recent visit of Narendra Modi to the U.S. has further cemented this relationship. But some people criticize the recent joint ventures between the two, arguing the current leaders lack world vision and mostly unaware of the international power structure. Whether they agree or not, nothing, as they say, lasts forever. And it will be interesting to see which way the wind blows in the coming months and years as the power balance in Asia shifts with fast-growing China.